It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
I think he was playing to the doing what he does best.
A lot of moving parts here, and more to be revealed.
Not credible, not believable.
A mother and a son, and the horror of it all that changed the dynamics of what was unforgettable, unforgivable, and unwavering for the public.
If there's another murder, he becomes a serial killer.
Pow, pow.
Welcome back to another episode of Grizzly True Crime. My name is Grizzly K, and in today's episode, what we're going to be talking about is the Murdaugh case. And specifically, I'm going to be sharing with you conversations that I had with Sonny Slaughter, a law enforcement and litigation expert who was on Law and Crime Network throughout the Alex Murdaugh trial, and with John Kelly, a criminal profiler and addiction specialist. It's always great getting the insight from experts like this, and I really hope that you will enjoy this episode. If you know nothing about this Murdaugh case, which has so many other cases attached to it, I have linked my playlist in the description box for you, and that gives you a great overview of everything that we knew right before the trial started. Of course, the trial unpacked so many more details, and that trial was about the murders of Maggie and Paul. I'm sure so much more is going to unfold as Alex Murdaugh faces 99 other financial crimes. And there's a lot to unpack there too. Also, if you are interested in my attempt at retelling the whole story, including clips from Sonny and John Kelly, I am going to be going over that video with all my Grizzly members and patrons. So if you are interested in that, all the links are on my website, grizzlytruecrime.com. And one more thing before we get started, hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you don't miss out on the next live stream, premiere, video upload, YouTube short, community post, whatever it is you're interested in. I make a lot of content on this channel for you to enjoy, and I appreciate your support so much, and I welcome you to this community. Okay, so now I'm excited to show you the conversations that I had with Sonny Slaughter and John Kelly, and I thank them so much for their time and for providing us with their insight.
I think it's because of one, this is a high profile family and a high profile murder and how it has all played out, in addition to all of the murders that seem to be attached to this particular family. You know, they said there was some ramblings and rhetoric about where there is a murder, where there is a Murdaugh, there is a murder. And their name, the family name, very prominent in South Carolina. So I think that the world was watching to see exactly, and we still don't know why.
Exactly. Does the motive make sense to you, how it's been presented?
No. They don't make sense to me. I do not think that he pulled the trigger, but I do think he was absolutely involved in the murder. And that was something that, you know, I was saying kind of behind the scenes. And I think I probably said it out loud a few times that the prosecution, I do not feel made the argument for reasonable doubt on their end. I think the reasonable doubt came in when the video of the dog and the kennel was played, and you could actually hear Alex himself. I also think a culmination of his lies when he took the stand, I think that is what connected the dots for the prosecution, because prior to that, I did not think they were making a solid enough argument in that direction.
And why do you think he decided to take the stand?
Arrogance. I believe that Alex Murdaugh is so arrogant and so he is someone, I believe, that thinks he is above the law because his family has this long-standing name. I think he thought that he could play to the emotions of the jury like I would never intentionally, was his words, harm my wife and son. I think he had gotten away with so many things. He thought he could do this as well.
Yes. I mean, this trial, this is the bits, I haven't watched the whole trial because many, many hours, but my word, just seeing,
Yes,
his manipulation, the whole thing play out, his attorneys. I mean, what do you think of Dick Carputlian pointing the gun at the jury like that?
Oh, I thought that was very dramatic and not necessary. And the reason why I say not necessary, because individuals, people in the public come in to jury rooms and to be a member of a juror without the preconceived notion about cases. Not everyone is involved in true crime murder and true crime antics as some of us may be. And these are ordinary citizens. This case I thought was very traumatic. And I hope that the jurors actually get some mental health services afterwards, because what we did not see, remember, they all did. And I think Poot, as they were calling him, his actions were not necessary. I think they got it, that there was a murder. I just don't think that was necessary.
Exactly. Damn it, I mustn't interrupt you with saying yes.
No, I just, this whole case, like you, I was I was on the case for almost the entire 6 weeks. I was on for the Law and Crime Network. I was appearing, and we were getting behind the scenes all of the information that we get for stuff that we were missing and documents. Very intense, a lot of information, and I was tuned in even when I wasn't on, because the unique components of this case, the dynamics of the family members, the dynamics of the city and the town, because so my family is actually from South Carolina. And when I heard that the sheriff, the chief, drove the brother on the evening of the murder, when they found out that he drove him to the location because because the uncle had Paul's car. He's actually from the town where my father is from, the sheriff officer. And I was like, oh, I hope he's not a family member. Right. So I just think this case, and it's not done yet.
Exactly. What mysteries do you think still remain?
Why they were murdered. I do not think that was answered. We know that there was a murder, but why were they murdered? And to say that because he wanted to gain sympathy for the financial portion of it, I just don't think that is, I don't think that's true. I think he did want to gain sympathy, but I don't think that was the reason for the murder. And it never made sense to me, and maybe it made sense to you, about his drug addiction, right? And the amount of narcotics that he said that he was taking, and that SLED never even came upon the scene with that type of investigation in mind. Like, this was a case that played out where there's a 911 call of a homicide. The individual says that police are on their way. They arrive upon the scene, and yet SLED never performed its due diligence from a law enforcement perspective in how they managed the initial crime scene from the time of the first arrival of the officer. Nothing was cordoned off. People were allowed to roam around. And I just think this was about botched law enforcement case, and I think there's something else going on with this family. I really do. We need to find
Interesting.
out what that is.
Yes. What do you think it is?
Well, I think it has to do with drugs. It has to do with money. And I think it has to do with an embezzlement that is something that other people are involved in. And this is some family dynamics that are very unique in and of itself. So where is the money that Alex actually embezzled? And I think that is the tie-in. I think
Yes.
there's something bigger at play.
Probably. I
And
wonder.
I
Do you
don't
think?
think that Buster is not guilty. I don't think Buster is innocent in all of this. I think he knows a lot more than what he's saying.
Interesting. Yes. And what do you think about SLED now suddenly changing Stephen Smith's ruling as now it's a homicide?
I think there's been a lot of questions about what SLED was doing all of these years. And now that that the world knows about Stephen Smith, and people are asking a lot of questions, I think that's the only reason why they changed the manner of death. And now that there's another investigation, there have been lawyers and family members. Stephen's mom has been questioning it, the secrets in the community. You know, South Carolina, this is a small town policing. And now that the spotlight is on, people want to go back and take a second look. I have always said that if law enforcement would have done their due diligence from even before Stephen. Remember, there's another young man that was there that had a death either prior to Stephen or after him. Remember, there's another murder. I can't think of his name right now. But did all these people have to die? If the rumors and the whispers were at all true about this particular family, about Alex's behavior, about Buster's behavior, about Paul's behavior, would we have had other innocent individuals? And had SLED, had anyone in law enforcement taken these other incidents seriously, could we have saved more people?
Right. And do you think that there's other victims that we don't know about yet?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely think there are other victims that we don't know about, and other murders victims that we don't know about, other financial crimes that we don't know about. I also noticed that there was some interesting dynamics. So, what is it? John Paul, with the brother that took the stand. Why can't I think of his name all of a sudden?
I'm also looking. I think his name was John.
Yes. So I think that while he is appeared to be innocent and not know what's going on, there's something interesting about him. And notice how the brother that was the lawyer did not take the witness stand. He did not say anything until after the verdict. And one of the things that he said after the verdict was he believes that Alec knows more than he is saying.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of cover up with this family, a lot of wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. And I also thought it was strange how people talked about Paul, but not talked about Maggie in the same way. Like she was literally shot 5 times. But
Exactly.
so much of the focus was on Paul and how he was killed and how people were involved with him. Even the other lawyers talked about Paul more than they talked about Maggie. So it was like Maggie was very separate in the conversation, I felt.
Yeah, it was really strange. And I'm still also trying to figure out what is her role in the family. How did that work? Especially with Paul saying that really, I think it was Gloria that raised him. So
Exactly. So
what is
Gloria,
Maggie's role?
So Gloria Satterfield raised him, right? And do you remember on the 911 call when Maggie was on the call, they asked her how old Gloria was, right? And she said, I don't know.
Exactly.
But Gloria Satterfield had been with the family for 20 years. So how is it that you did not know how old this woman that was raising your child, essentially, how is it that you didn't know how old she was? Maggie seemed kind of removed from, in her 911 call, from emotion. They all had weird emotions. They had Buster had a very flat affect, talking about his mother and his brother. You know, now he's saying, you know, he's trying to grieve and everything, but they showed very little emotion. Now Maggie's sister did when she took the stand, but Buster, no, I didn't get anger. I didn't get fear. I didn't get anything from him. Kind of just matter of fact.
Yeah, they are all like that, huh? It is a bit odd to watch.
Yeah, and I thought Alec was just a gamesman. He could turn it on, turn it off, and I think he was playing to the doing what he does best. I just don't think he had a 20-year extensive opioid habit in the way that no one outside of the family knew. How was he getting access to the drugs? Did he have a prescription? If he was doing it with, that would be a lot of pills coming in. So how did that happen? Were they being shipped in? You know, I just had so many questions. Were they being shipped in through the mail? Was someone going to transport them? Did they track that behavior? How was he getting such a large quantity of pills on a regular basis and no one knew? How was the money transacted? Did they follow the money when SLED did their investigation for his bank account? Like, how did they track that?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem more like dealing than consuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Damn.
So how did they, when SLED, you know, when you're doing a law enforcement investigation, and particularly when it's involves drugs. So who was the drug trafficker? Because we never got any of that, and that was not a part of the trial at all. And for him to have that quantity of narcotics, there had to be a producer, a supplier, and then a transporter. And how was the funds dispensed? Who had it? How was he getting access? Who was the doctor that provided the initial subscription? Did he have some kind of illness that required it? They never brought any of that. They talked a lot about the financial crimes piece, but not about how what led to the murder. That's what I want to know. And who did the murder?
Yeah, exactly. Because it was interesting when they specified the height of the shooter, and that was completely way off compared to Alex's height. And they said there could have been two shooters. So in your opinion, do you think there could have been two shooters?
I think there could have been two shooters based on proximity of Paul to Maggie and the disparity in the types of guns and the location. So had it been Alec, where Paul was shot and how he was shot, there was one gun. But then Maggie was shot with a different gun. So did they find the guns? They never found the guns, right? Mm-hmm. So did the person, where were the guns? How could Alex have transported the guns away from the scene without them ever finding them at all, right? These very specific guns. So he would have had to shot Paul first with one gun, dropped, ran, and picked up another gun different type style, different type holding. He would have had to been so quick on the draw. Not saying that he could have, but remember, he also was a different weight. He and everything. So the height differential, all of those things were, you don't have to hold a pump action gun this way. You can fire lower. The recoil is going to be different. So there are a lot of different things that I was thinking about. I just think there was probably two different shooters, because nobody ever said how the guns would have been off the scene. But then again, they didn't do much of an investigation, so we don't know where the guns were. And remember, John said that he went down to see where the bodies were the day after, and he could see. So Maggie was in the grass, looked like she was running, right? That's why Paul would have likely been shot first, because he would not have stayed in the door frame had he heard his mother screaming, running, and a shot. So that's why I think Paul was shot first, close range. Maggie was further away, maybe at the truck, heard the gunshot, and then was running in the direction, if that makes sense, if you were following the trial.
Yes, that does make sense. And the way you put it, when it's like, okay, one gun, drop the gun, get the next one. I mean, it does make it seem quite ridiculous.
Well, because you've got to be quick with the guns. You've got to be able to and know where they are in relation. Like, you've got to have one ready and another one ready. And why not just one gun? Like, you literally could have killed them with one gun.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking, two people. And they never did tire impressions to see if there were potential new vehicles. I didn't even see them check. They didn't say anything about checking the hood of Alex's car to see how warm it was from, because he said, I thought he came down in the cart, but then he said he went back in the car to the house to get the gun. It's just so many things that I thought were wrong with how this investigation was handled. And I just think there's so much that has been missed.
Yes, I mean, even with John going the next day and cleaning up some of the remains, I mean, that's not ethical or normal, right?
Well, so one of the things that I had said, a lot of times people don't realize, so law enforcement does not clean up crime scenes. They do not clean crime scenes. It is not a part of their normal course of duty. In fact, they can be quite messy. But what they're supposed to do is provide the family with a list of crime scene cleanup companies. And then a crime scene cleanup company, you would reach out to them, schedule the call, and then they would come out and clean the scene, right? The problem is, when people think about it, they really release the crime scene very quickly, which is how you also understand that an extensive investigation was not done, because they were looking for things at night, right? Because this crime happened at night. There was no follow through the next day to see what you may have missed during the day. So no second look. And the acreage on the farm, I did not hear at any point did anyone do a grid search for weapons, do a grid search for footprints or anything else that would have really led to potentially finding others. The way they allowed people to come onto the crime scene. Remember, there's a long driveway at the house. There's a gate and a long driveway from where you come onto the property. That should have been cordoned off with the second person arriving to the scene, right? Or at least one of the people. I might not say second, because one officer should not be on the scene by themselves. But the officer did not say that they came out with guns drawn or anything like that. I just didn't get any of that.
Exactly. And I did also see where because about the clothes, I'm still thinking, where are the clothes that he was wearing just
Mhm.
before? They never found those clothes. And when they say what they checked at the house, but there were 25 to 30 people in the house. They didn't want to disturb them, but they could see there was no blood in the showers or the basins. Like, how are you going to visually see that? And there's no forensic test being done either. It really sucks.
They did not see any. So now, one of the things is there was a murder. I can't remember how long ago it was, but a wife was accused of murdering her husband, right? So they took her away. But before she was taken away, her sister was there, and she gave her sister her purse, so she could come down to the police station. There were other people on the scene. Where was the gun? It was in the purse that she gave to her sister that nobody ever checked. So where were Alex's clothes? The number of people. Did anyone leave with a bag? And how is it that the murders had no cameras at their home?
That, right? For such a wealthy family with so much to protect, no cameras.
No cameras. I have cameras in my house, and I live in an apartment. So I have cameras here. I have security here. And my feed can be watched by my children at other locations. If I leave the house, I can see what's going on in my house. I can actually hear what's going on here as well if I'm not here. And
Wow,
it
yeah.
records and in multiple locations. So you can't go in and delete it at one. So you see I'm far from wealthy. And these were wealthy individuals with no video footage of their house. I just found that strange too.
That is so strange, especially Moselle. I don't know about their actual house, if that has camera or not, but Moselle sounds like then the perfect place to be because there's no cameras and who knows what activity goes on there.
Exactly. So why? And Maggie, he called her to come, both of them to come there. Now, Maggie was not innocent at all, because remember when Paul and the girlfriend had a car accident, and he called his parents, but before they even checked on them, is what in the documentary about them, she said they took all of the guns out of the car that they had in there before police arrived.
Priorities.
And
not like, are you okay?
Yeah, and same thing with the boating accident. Remember, the other family members were not allowed to go down to where the boats, to the water. But Maggie and Alex did when they arrived. So there was definitely preferential treatment, and definitely some involvement with law enforcement that was very shady.
And do you think that shadiness will continue? For example, if Alex is a little bit of, I don't think he's a scapegoat or the fall guy, but maybe one of many involved in this whole bigger picture. Do you think the shady stuff will continue now?
Yes, but it will be harder for them to keep, not because SLED is working, but because the world is watching.
I'm sure if I've got that question from the Netherlands, yeah, I'm sure lots of people are watching in the community.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Right.
a lot. I think the takedown of Alex did something that had never been done before with this family. It showed not only their vulnerability, but it showed the rest of the community that this family that they kept the secrets of this family, and that this potentially contributed to what we are seeing right now. This was a snowball happening. This didn't just happen. This was a snowball. You start off and you make it small, and then you roll it, and then it becomes the boulder that knocks everything down.
Oh, yes. And I've heard people say if he didn't take those actions by shooting Maggie and Paul, then this would have probably gone on for a long time still.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we say, it's probably still going to go on. But, at that level, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But this case, it is beyond fascinating. I'm glad that you are talking about this because this is a trial. This is a family. This is a murder. These are multiple murders that we will be talking about for our lifetime. I have said that, I'm a law enforcement instructor and consultant and litigation expert, and I am actually going to put together some training material specific for law enforcement on this case and all of the complex nuances that allowed this to happen over the course of decades, because people ignored much of what was clearly evident to those who could do nothing, and law enforcement could.
Exactly. What in your experience is it that makes law enforcement kind of have that group mentality where you see like mass corruption or masses just turning a blind eye to things? Like, how does that happen?
I think it happens when where there's financial gain, there is political power, and I think politics, power, and privilege is why this exists. What you have powerful families who are not ordinary people, although because they have the financial resources to move the chess players on the boards in a way that advantage them at every move they make. There are cover-ups and corruptions because people can be bought, they can be traded, and ethics is expendable. When it comes to, will I go higher? Will I stay in longer? Will I have financial gain from this? But remember, this was a family that has wielded the shield of justice for decades in a community and in a state. And they've been allowed to do this. This is power, privilege, and posturing at its very best, with politics leading the way. And it started long before Alex was born.
Yes, that was going to be my question. Yes. Do you think it started, maybe is he like like the runt of the litter, or did it start way back?
Oh, this goes way back. And remember, we're talking about South Carolina. And not just privilege, we're talking about white privilege. Okay. And we're talking about financial power that is so massive. One of the things that I noticed, and because, and I'm going to say this, and some people may be offended, but when I saw Alec and how he was being treated by the two Black law enforcement professionals that were in the courtroom with him, it seemed like they had some deference towards him. There was one particular incident that happened that I noticed when the trial was finished for the day, and Alec turned around with his, he was carrying the brown folder with all of the documents that he had. And he turned around and he handed it to the Black woman officer in a way that it was almost like, carry this. It would, for I saw it, and then his demeanor with the shorter Black police officer with the mustache that was with him every single day walking outside, right? But it was the white officer who initially was dressed in a suit. And I didn't notice it until after I did some rewinds of some video. He was not dressed in a uniform, but when he put on his uniform, his demeanor and interaction with Alec was more that what I thought was appropriate and not privileged. He was very direct with. He is the gentleman that you can see in uniform that is standing directly behind Alex for the sentencing. And he was shaking his head. He was very serious. He never smirked with Alex. He never carried anything. But he knew, and I thought, was very profound in his actions. Miss Shelley, I felt so bad for her. I think they were a very unique family, and the housekeeper, when the question was asked about what Maggie once said about it was something racially off that had to do with Mexicans or something during the questioning, and the I think it was the prosecutor asked during the questioning, were you offended by that language? And she said, no, I wasn't. I said, oh, this family was something else.
What do you think of there's actually two people buying the Moselle property now to help pay for Alex's legal fees in his appeal?
You know, I'm always fascinated by that. And they just showed on the news today that the living room furniture, one of the furniture sold for the most $30,000. Where's the family money? Like, where's the law firm is still prominent. It's changed name, but it's still very prominent. The family is still very prominent. So how is it that they're not paying for helping him out with his legal fees at all? Like the brother that worked at the law firm with him. And what is going on with John in the family businesses? So I'm wondering what that's all about. And Maggie and Paul didn't have a life insurance policy, which I also thought was really weird.
That is weird. I did not know they didn't have one. They didn't have one. Okay. God, I thought maybe that's one of the motives.
Well, see, and they said that they didn't have an insurance policy, but Alec had an insurance policy. So how is it that you're a family of lawyers, but your family members don't have insurance policies, wills, and that just didn't make sense to me.
So far, we've got no cameras at the property and no life insurance. That's so weird, right?
But remember, Alec had a life insurance policy because he wanted it to go to Buster.
Oh, yes. Him and Cousin Eddie concocting plans.
Oh, Cousin Eddie was just a hot mess. I don't think Cousin Eddie how is it that Cousin Eddie was not on the Fed's radar if he was the one with the trafficking of the drugs?
Right? Oh, man. There's so many. This is it's like a soapy almost. It's so many people and so many things to figure out.
Like this, it's like moving the chessboard. Like I said, the power, privilege, and politics, moving the people around on the chessboard. It's just not normal.
And it's only what we know. Imagine what we don't know.
Right.
Oh,
right.
Man. Ooh, this is a good one. I must ask you about what do you think of the Snapchat video having such relevance in the trial? I mean, everyone could hear his voice. Then he took the stand. Then they're like, that's definitely his voice. But Snapchat and social media in today's trials, what do you think of that?
So I think that the digital footprint is what I'm finding that all of these trials have in common. The Snapchat video, his voice, is what I think really sealed the connection for the murder for him, because he also lied that he wasn't there. There wasn't enough time. So when you think about that video, that is how he was caught. So the dog actually solved the crime. This was not like a law enforcement thing. This was the dog putting two and two together. But I also thought it was ironic that Paul's phone was left behind for law enforcement to find, and Maggie's phone was found so far away. What was that all about with the phone? Because remember, why didn't Maggie have her phone on her? Why wasn't Maggie's phone still in the car? Why did John have to find Maggie's phone about what, a mile or however distance it was? But Paul's phone was still nearby. How did Maggie's phone? Why would the killer or killers take Maggie's phone, not Paul's? Right. And the Snapchat and the social media,
Yeah.
that was what the jury said. The members of the jury have been speaking out. They said that was it. Like all the other stuff we heard, no, that was the video. That was the evidence. But digital footprint is really prominent in a lot of these cases. Social media, how people show up, or how they disappear.
Yeah, even like in Delphi, remember that Snapchat video? I mean, in this case, there's quite a few actually where it's like, whoa, Snapchat or Instagram or social media is really playing quite a role in it.
Right. And then the use and the phones and how the phones and cars. So how they were able to say, this is how he was driving, where he was. And then the interesting piece about his 200 steps in the room. But just because the phone was there doesn't mean that he was actually there. If there was another person, the other person could have been moving the phone around. But there's a lot going on here. And I just don't think that we're finished with it. And this is aside from the other 99 cases that he has. And he said that Alec could get up during the court proceedings and he could really put on a show, that he could draw in the emotions and kind of be emotional when it suited him. So he was a master manipulator, a very good actor. He probably should have went to acting school instead of law school.
He really should have. I mean, even the 911 call and then how he cried on the stand and everything that he did. I mean, he really can just put those waterworks on, like and here we go.
Yeah,
becomes the voice. Yeah.
Yes. And even in the video where they're sitting in the car, remember? So police arrive on the night of the murder and they have him sitting in the car. He's got his white shirt on. Remember, he's being questioned. I'm thinking, were they acting as his lawyers then? If not, why were they in the car?
Man. So with all that privilege, corruption, power, and everything, how did Alec end up being charged and now sentenced for these murders?
I think the crime was, people can forgive drugs. People can forgive embezzlement, or at least it doesn't arise. I think it was the murders of a mother and a son and the horror of it all that changed the dynamics of what was unforgettable, unforgivable, and unwavering for the public. I think at some point, there was someone that said, this is enough, this is too many, and this has to end. We had the death of an innocent young lady on a boating accident. We had Stephen. We had the other young man. We had Mrs. Satterfield. Like I said, it was the snowball that started small and gained momentum. And now, but for these murders, I think he would have figured out a way to get Paul out of this. The financial crimes would have been attributed to his opioid addiction, which would have potentially reduced the sentence because people would feel sorry for him, but not the murder of a mother and a son, and in such a heinous way. I think that was it.
Thank goodness, right? And maybe they realize, oh my gosh, if he can kill his wife and son, imagine what else he can do, or how many more people will die.
Right. And I think that was the end of it for everyone. One of the things that the judge said that I thought was really key was, if Alex, I'm saying if, was on all of these drugs, right? Maybe he becomes a different person. Maybe he is the man that has a monster that is not who he thinks he is when he's on all of these drugs.
Yes, that also hit me, especially from the documentary where they said that Paul, when he gets drunk, has an alter ego that they literally call Timmy. That's almost
Right.
learned behavior then, like
Yes.
seeing two sides of his father, perhaps. Well, then he's also got two sides. When he's on a substance, out comes Timmy.
Right. And I also thought it was unique from the documentary that all of these young people were the access that they had to alcohol. I mean, young people have access to alcohol, but the way in which none of the family ever questioned how all of these kids were drinking and out partying. This was a lot going on for them to be so young. And it just doesn't seem like the other family members were doing enough questioning of this behavior from their own children. And I'm wondering, because these other family people didn't have money like the Murdaughs did, right? So did they allow this association to continue and to go on unquestioned because the Murdaughs were so powerful? And they thought it was great that their children were connected to them. But they were doing a lot. In fact, as we would say, they were doing the most with the drinking, the out on the boat, they just late at night. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like who was in charge? And and I do know, I'm a parent. I've had kids, and one of my sons is always out doing, well, he was always doing something he shouldn't. But this seemed like constantly. And the young lady, domestic violence, and her parents they didn't know. The friends knew. And that worries me that young people don't say anything. I always try to talk to my own kids that the silence that they keep allows things to manifest. And I think not only did this family have secrets, but the community had secrets. And that's part of the problem.
Yes, and it was all fun until it wasn't.
That part, it was all fun until it wasn't. And then when it wasn't, too many people's lives have been lost. Too many people's lives have been forever changed. Stephen's mother will never be the same. Mrs. Satterfield, what really happened to her?
I mean, really, what happened? I mean, the way
Really?
they also so cold on that 911 call, Maggie and Paul, and it's just like, I don't know. She fell. I don't know if she can get up. Yeah.
Very matter of fact. I don't know if she can get up, and I'm thinking, and you don't know how old she is? Like, she's been with the family for 20, you don't know? So were they not, so it didn't seem like they made her a part. She was really a worker.
Wow.
And she died. She something happened. I don't know whether she just died or whether she was murdered, but and why isn't anyone charging? Why hasn't Alex been charged with ethical violations and criminal charges related to the Satterfield death for trying to secure money from the insurance company? That is a crime. To defrauding insurance companies for money is a crime.
I don't know if you ever did anything legal.
I'm wondering, and I think Maggie was okay with all of this. I think she was okay with a lot of things because it benefited her until it didn't.
Yes.
And 5 shots to her is a lot, and I think that was very personal. Yeah, they don't talk about Maggie in the same. I did not feel that there was great empathy, nor did they focus on how personal 5 shots would be to an individual and to a woman. Because what could she have been doing? Like, Paul was a greater threat because he was a male, you know, agile. Maggie, and 5 times we never got that out of the trial. I've gotten a lot of calls from law enforcement because I'm on the Law and Crime Network and doing it. But I think what you're doing will then give people more fodder for conversation. But okay, let's really figure out why this happened and how. I want to know how someone actually got on the property, off the property. And if he didn't have help, where are the guns?
Where's the guns? Where's the clothes?
Where are the clothes?
What's happening?
Yeah.
And I wonder who would be helping him. It's also, isn't it so odd, the whole timeline, like his company confronting him, his dad on the deathbed. It's also so weird to me how he said to Maggie, like, okay, he's like luring her there to say they're going to visit the dad. But when he's there, his story is, no, I went to go visit my mom. I always found that so weird.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So exactly who and why did you go visit them that night? Like, why didn't you call on the phone? Like, there's a sitter there. So why did you have to go in person at that time of the evening? That was to create the illusion, the alibi. And, honestly, we don't know how long Maggie and Paul were actually dead before he found them.
That's true as well.
So did he, were they shot and killed? I mean, based on what they said. Yeah. And then the woman who did the autopsy, I found her interesting, the expert, because she didn't do everything. And I write expert witness reports. Every case matters, but in a case like this, I'm going to overkill it in the writings. And you didn't take any X-rays. You didn't. I was like, oh my gosh, well, what were you doing? So you were using, and this is the other thing about policing and process and law enforcement that really matters, because sometimes people who are experts, including us, if you get so stuck in that you've done this before, and this is how you've always done it, then you do not go the extra mile to do more. Like, it becomes a process that you follow without saying, you know what, let me do something else. It becomes a pattern and practice because you're set in doing it just that way. And she said, well, I've been doing this for 20. It doesn't matter. She should have taken X-rays.
Yes, the complacency was real.
Very, very.
Not
It's
appropriate,
like,
given the
I'm
case.
flying the plane all the time this way, and this is the route I'm going. But you see that there's smoke and you can't see, so you don't feel like you need to go around, or you don't feel like you need to radio. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Exactly.
Yes. I think Paul was erratic. I think he had, he did not feel as loved as Buster. Buster was clearly the favorite. I think Paul was getting into a lot of trouble. And maybe Alec did feel like, okay, let me put him out of his misery. And also, Paul was the weakest link in the family. Based on all of his actions, he was the weakest link, and he would not have done well in prison. Yeah. He might have talked about stuff that he should not talk about.
Silencing them, Maggie and Paul. For what?
And then Maggie could go on along with a lot of things, but maybe she couldn't go along with the murder of her own son.
Exactly. So silence her next. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Sure. Well, I can see we could sit here all day, but you've got a lot to do, a lot of writing as well. Me too. I'm going to be putting all this together, getting all the clips. If you could, what would you say are your top 5 moments from the trial? So my top 5 moments from the trial would be listening to the Snapchat video and hearing Alex's own words. The way in which they talked about Maggie versus Paul. The longevity and the real of murders that
seem to have been around this family. And I say real because it was like watching it in real time without knowing what the ending is going to be, because it was one person after another person after another. So every scene, there was something that we could learn later about another victim. Buster's testimony and the judge's words at the very end in sentencing. I think the judge summed up the case, summed up the climate for all of us. And I just think there is an untold story. There's a lot to learn about the Murdaughs. And your content, people know who you are. And when I tell you, that's why folks were trying to get you. You remember that, honey, they're watching you. Everyone watches you. They don't say anything, but you are one powerful woman. You need to they need to be giving you some kind of award for this. No, I'm serious. I'm really serious. I did true crime, but never in the podcast and never like this. And I'm seeing folks now, you are the baddest thing out there. I'm telling you. Of course, I'm telling you. And then the Grizzlies, I tell everybody, I said, them Grizzlies got game, baby. Not Giselle, you got a really strong following.
I'm not quite sure how I let myself get where I got, but it came from, I battled that addiction for so many years. I was spending so much money on pills. I got in a spot I couldn't.
Now, what type of addiction are you referring to?
My addiction is to opiate painkillers,
and when
specifically oxycodone, OxyContin.
When you look at the name Murdaugh in that particular area, that's kind of the definition of power in that area. The Murdaugh name is an affluent, powerful name to be reckoned with. Yeah, the family's really connected politically. Okay, I mean, there's no question about it. And it's been that way for generation upon generation. So you must understand, not only the manipulation is taking place as he's growing up and various generations involved in politics or what have you, but what I believe is that once you throw drugs into the mix, now you're really complicating the manipulation, because now you have to manipulate for certain policies. You have to manipulate for just politics in general, depending on whose side you want to get cozy with. You have to go out with people. You have to manipulate them in any way, shape, or form to be part of the game and on your side in the game. And then when you're into drugs, now you've got to manipulate the drug, and you've got to manipulate under the influence of the drug. So you've got to make sure you have enough drugs so you don't start to go through withdrawal. Get what well as dope sick, which is an extremely rough withdrawal, and usually needs quite a bit of medical supervision. Like I said before, if once you become addicted to the opiates, really, you don't have to do a whole lot of thinking anymore. The opiates will, help you and show you how to manipulate to continue to be able to make money, to get money from somewhere, rob, steal, cheat, whatever you got to do to keep that addiction alive. The addiction does not want to die. It's a progressive illness. And eventually its goal is to kill you. Yeah, when we're talking about Alec, I mean, his middle name could be manipulator. But also now you throw drugs into the equation, and now you're talking about real heavy-duty drug-influenced manipulation. So you've got the manipulations of his practice, all those manipulating features that take place throughout the course of the day. And now you've got a drug addiction that's trying to manipulate him to continue to use. And, it's a progressive illness. Kind of the more you use, the more you need. So the more you use, very progressive illness that's focused on, like any other progressive illness, in the long run, killing you. When you become addicted to opiates, you don't have to think really anymore. Opiates will teach you how to manipulate. They will show you how to manipulate. You don't even have to think anymore. Opiates will do all your manipulation for you. They will do all your thinking for you. They will show you how to manipulate to continually get money any which way, shape, or form, any way you got to do it to keep that addiction alive. That addiction does not want to die. It's progressive. It wants to continue within you, and it needs money in order to survive. Money to buy the drug that feeds it. It's that simple. So you're looking at a lot of manipulation here. You're looking at, career manipulation. You're looking at manipulation that goes on through a family in order to keep your addiction a secret. And you're looking at the moves you have to make in order to purchase your drugs. So it's all about manipulation. And that's why Alex's middle name could have been manipulation, should have been manipulation.
Maybe it was. Yes, very good.
A lot of people here, I'm sure there's a lot of people who believe that.
Yes. Let's see this other one I've got. Wait. Oh, yeah. I wanted to. Wait, how would I ask this? I'm going to ask the gambling one again. Oh, yeah. But so they say that he was taking 2,000 milligrams of opioids a day, $60,000, which doesn't even add up, of that per week. But yet, 2 days before Maggie and Paul were murdered, Maggie was at a baseball game with him, and she was getting irritated because him and Buster were drinking. So how would someone who's having 2,000 milligrams of oxycodone a day be drinking?
This is the first time I've heard about his drinking. And I'll tell you, that's a very important piece for me, okay, being an addiction specialist. Because opiates in general are very strong central nervous system depressants. And to have a, very, very, very expensive habit. How much exactly? We saying $60,000?
$60,000 a week.
We're talking a $60,000 a week habit. In my career, I have people on a hell of a drug, and what I mean by that, on a hell of a lot less central nervous system depressant, like heroin, which is an opiate, any kind of opiates in general, oxycodone, OxyContin. I mean, I've got to tell you that usually what you're involved in with that kind of habit, is a nodding off. You're not usually at baseball games and drinking beers or drinking anything else, because I can't see how somebody with that kind of habit could also ingest alcohol, and alcohol is another strong central nervous system depressant. So you are mixing two very strong central nervous system depressants. I don't know how he's alive, to be honest with you, based on the so-called habit. I have to put it out like that because I've never seen it before. I've never heard of it before. And people need to understand this is not a street drug. This is not a street opiate. Okay. This is the purest of the pure. Okay. That he's using. These are pharmaceuticals. These are not, cut drugs that were purchased off the street. These are pharmaceutical opiates, and maybe much more expensive than we even know, because they had to be getting tighter to get. They had to be getting harder to get. So you may have had to pay up to get them, especially if a dealer knew he was this strung out. The dealer would take advantage of him, and then the dealer would manipulate him, for the money.
And I tell you again, I respect this court, but I'm innocent. I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my wife, Maggie, and I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my son, Paul.
Well, and it might not have been you. It might have been the monster you become when you take 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 opioid pills. Maybe you become another person.
Absolutely no question about it. I call it the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde syndrome. I've called it that all these years. Because when you are addicted, severely addicted, and that's under the influence, right? So what does under the influence mean? It means drugs are influencing your behavior, your actions, your thinking, your whole life. Like I said, when you're addicted like that, you don't have to think anymore. The drugs will do all the thinking for you. But what happens is you do become a different person. There's no question about it. Okay? I mean, there are people that lie, cheat, steal, kill, rape, under the influence of drugs. I mean, there's just no question about it. You're just a different person. You've gone from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, and there's pretty much nothing once you reach a certain point that you will not do in order to get those drugs. Okay, I mean they at that point in time completely control your life.
And then when we think of the psychological pressure he was under, his dad, he was confronted that day about stealing money from the law firm. And on the same day that he committed the murders, his dad was rushed to the hospital. He was very sick. He was on his deathbed. And then 6 weeks before, Maggie said she wants a divorce from him. So there's that as well. The son's confronting him. Everything, it's like the walls were closing in. So with that kind of pressure, it's almost like he had an evil PTSD response. Shooting them is not the answer. I just wonder, with all that pressure that was closing in on him, do you think that would have affected his decision-making on the day he committed the murders?
It absolutely could have. That judge, I give him a lot of credit. I think that judge was right on. I think you're absolutely correct. Because eventually, with any addict, the walls will start to close in. You'll dig yourself into a corner, into a hole, okay? You'll corner yourself, So, as this stress is mounting, and now he's looking for angles. Don't forget, it's all manipulation and angles to keep the addiction going. What he had to do to keep his business afloat, the practice going, keep people off his back. All that's crashing down. This happens most of the time if the person doesn't, die. I mean, usually at the end of a severe addiction, a person's going to do one of three things. They are either going to get into recovery and get well, or they are going to overdose and die, or they are going to end up in prison. So, I mean, this is classical. He's ending up in prison. Okay. So with everything closing in on him, I mean, I'm sure that he convinced himself that this was the best way. His addiction convinced him this is the best way to move forward. You know, I don't have any insurance policies, but I have trust funds. You know, and again, this is his, I'm believing, thinking on drugs. Okay. This is his addict thinking, his addict mind telling him to do this. All right. Do I believe if this man never got involved with opiates, I don't think he ends up in court and gets convicted of killing anybody. I really think that unless there is a contributing secondary addiction, like gambling that you mentioned, that's, you know, working here as well. Okay. I mean, I think it's 20% of all gamblers have, you know, a suicide attempt. Pathological gamblers have a suicide attempt, and even higher than that with pathological gamblers, probably 40-50% have suicidal ideations. Okay, when it sooner or later it all goes bad. So I don't know if he would have killed anyone if he was not so strung out on these opiates. And again, it's a horrendous addiction. People do kill people on opiate addictions. There's no doubt about it. I mean, usually it's like an armed robbery kind of thing, you know, where they run into a liquor store and they need to fix, they need to get high real quick. So, you know, they want the money, and the guy gives them a problem with the money behind the counter. So they shoot the guy, and they don't care if he's dead, whatever he is. They just want to rifle the cash register and get out of there, get to their dealer and get some bags. Okay. So I could see his addiction telling him, this is the only way out. Okay. This is the only way out. This is the best way out for you. Okay. And all of a sudden, Mr. Hyde is in control, and that's a pretty gruesome personality to have in control. And so I won't be surprised. I'm not surprised on anything that's happened with that type of addiction. I will not be surprised if I hear any more violence that ends up connected to him. And I will not be surprised to hear any more, you know, nefarious manipulation that may have taken place that's connected to him. Because, like I said, this is an addiction like I've never seen before, and I've seen them all. I mean, you know, I've ran units in hospitals, in inner city hospitals, with all types of opiate addictions. You know, and I got to tell you, this is just a major addiction. I mean, money becomes your enemy when you're an addict, because you need money to get the drug. So you do what you do to get the money, but the money is only buying the drug that eventually is going to kill you. The more money you have, you know, the longer the addiction, the bigger the addiction, and you know, the quicker it can kill you too. I just, this kind of tolerance based on all this, you know, all this drug use is just foreign, and the numbers, and if you're right about these trust funds, and you're talking $5 million, that can buy a lot of opiates. That can buy a lot of oxycodone. It can buy a lot of oxycodone and a lot of sympathy, you know. And I do believe he was on drugs. I'm just having a hard time ingesting myself the amount of drugs he claims he was on. Okay, but I mean, drugs will, influence you. You're under the influence and will bring out, or turn Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. Here we are. We've come full circle. We're back to the manipulation, the drugs here, and I will not be surprised on anything that I hear. Anything. It would not surprise me at all, because again, you're going from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde is a really, really bad personality and character.
And do you think that when he's crying like that on the body cams and on the 911 calls, do you think that's real? Like, with the Jekyll and Hyde type theory, if his mask is off and he's Hyde and he's a bad man, but then afterwards, does he realize, like, oh my word, I just shot my wife and son? Do you think the emotion is authentic at all or not?
If the calls after he found his wife and son, I do not believe are authentic. Only my opinion. And the reason I believe they're not authentic, because if he is on that much opiate, if he's doing those kinds of drugs, the amounts are just astronomical. He's not feeling guilt or remorse or sadness or anything else. I mean, he may try and act it. Again, part of the manipulation. Do I believe it was legitimate when he was on the stand and they were cross-examining him? Yes, I do believe that was legitimate. Okay, I watched it very carefully, because at this point in time, he's coming off. He's off. He's withdrawn from all this drug.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found that interesting. If you did, please like the video and share it. Hashtag Grizzly True Crime would be great. You could also use the hashtag Murdaugh Trial, Alex Murdaugh, the Murdaugh Mysteries. Any of those would help to categorize it all together. Sending so much love to all the families that were affected by all these tragedies surrounding the Murdaugh murders. Gloria Satterfield's family, Stephen Smith's family, Mallory Beach's family, and then all the others that Alex Murdaugh stole from. There's so many. I must say, this Murdaugh case actually leaves me feeling so upset. It makes me feel so angry because of the greed and the entitlement, the corruption, and just everything that went on in plain sight for so many years before it was too late. It's a lot, and there's really a lot of moving parts to this entire web, as Alex Murdaugh called it himself. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. It really is, and it's pretty icky to be in it. Nonetheless, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe.
About 8:50 p.m., and the defendant over there, Alex Murdaugh, took a 12-gauge shotgun and shot him in the shoulder, in the chest and the shoulder, with buckshot. The evidence is going to show it was a 1,000,000 to 1 shot. He could have survived that, but after that, another shot went up under his head and did catastrophic damage.
Paul Murdaugh was shot twice with buckshot, 12-gauge buckshot, once in the chest. The second shot ended up, and there's going to be some question about the direction of that shot, but ended up entering his skull cavity, and the gases from that shot literally exploded his head like a watermelon hit with a sledgehammer.
Picked up that .300 Blackout rifle and opened fire on his wife, Maggie, just feet away near some sheds that used to be a hangar. Pow, pow. 2 shots, abdomen in the leg, and took her down. And after that, there were additional shots, including 2 shots to the head that again did catastrophic damage.